Good evening, more, and welcome. Tonight we're going to be venturing into the depths of the woods because there are cabins here waiting for our arrival. I hope you're ready because it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I took 5 of my friends, all girls, to a place known as Bunny Man's Bridge in Fairfax. You may be wondering what Bunny Man's Bridge is, so let me enlighten you. The story goes that in 1904, there was an asylum not far from the bridge. The nearby residents didn't like the idea of mental patients living close by, so they protested and got it shut down. All the patients were taken by bus to Lawton Prison, but the bus swerved and crashed. They were able to locate all the inmates except one, Douglas Griffin. After the crash, he vanished. Weeks passed, and rabbit corpses began appearing in the woods, as Douglas was apparently eating bunnies to stay alive. This went on for a while until one Halloween night, a group of kids hanging around the bridge reported seeing something strange. Then, in a flash, they were found strung up like the rabbits, gutted and hanging from the bridge. The missing mental patient was assumed to be responsible. The rumor goes that if you come to the bridge on Halloween night at midnight, you will end up just like those poor children. That's the urban legend. It was a Monday around 9 p.m. when we showed up. I wanted to get out, climb up, and walk along the railroad tracks that run over the bridge, as I had done that plenty of times in the past. I pulled the keys out of the ignition and sat for a minute, telling them the tale of the Bunny Man, which freaked them out, so they decided to stay in the car. We sat there talking for about 5 minutes until someone in the back seat gasped and froze, staring out the back window on my side of the car. I turned to my right to look at her, and everyone else's faces froze in horror. The girl right behind me yelped as I realized what was happening. I turned my head the other way to see who must be approaching when someone started pounding on the back window and continued as they moved up towards my door. I turned just in time to see a man with a huge white dog rip my door open, as it was still unlocked from when I was planning to get out. For a second, he just stood there and stared at me, visibly enraged. He started telling me this was private property and that we were trespassing. Before I had a chance to tell him we'd leave, he started yelling at me to get out of the car. I was like, "No, we're just gonna leave." At that point, he lost his mind and started yelling in my face. I think he saw my keys sitting on my lap because he tried to grab them, but I pushed his arm away and started yelling profanities while my friends in the passenger seat gasped loudly. He stepped back for a second, looked up and down, then started eyeing the big metal cop flashlight I keep under my seat and tried to grab that too. Fortunately, his dog was off doing its own thing. It was actually a cute dog that seemed rather friendly, and the leash held his arm away long enough for me to grab the door handle. He caught it just before it shut and was trying to force it back open, saying he was going to call the police. I think I said likewise, and finally thought to grab my keys with my free hand and start the car. I drove off while he was still holding the handle, then closed it once he couldn't keep up and had to let go. I watched him in the mirror as we sped away, and it really freaked me out. He let go of the leash and began sprinting after us until he knew he couldn't catch up. At that point, he just let out a deep, primal scream just as we passed under the bridge. It looked like he was bending down to pick something up, maybe a rock, but we cleared the corner before he could throw anything. I told my dad about it when I got home, and he made me call the police to report it. The woman at the station actually sounded pretty concerned, which was something I wasn't expecting. After that, I read up on all these stories about the legendary Bunny Man. Many of them described a crazy man yelling about trespassing and such, which was already enough to freak me out. What's really wild is that the guy could kind of match up with some of the descriptions given in other reports. Although they all sounded like pretty generic white guy descriptions, it shouldn't have been that shocking. What made it so confusing was that he didn't look crazy or dangerous. He was maybe 5'10", white, mid-50s, looking quite fit and healthy, wearing a flannel shirt, jeans, and a baseball cap. Aside from his psycho behavior, he might have actually been kind of hot. Also, the dog threw me off because of how totally friendly and docile it seemed. I still can't figure out where he would have walked up from. I had been checking my mirrors and peripherals the whole time we were parked there up to the moment of the first girl's gasp. All I can think of is that he must have walked straight out of this bamboo forest that's on the right as you come out of the other side of the narrow tunnel running through under the bridge. We had turned around and were facing the bridge from the other side, so this bamboo was on our left, and the whole rest of the immediate area is so thickly forested, aside from a long wide concrete driveway to our right just in front of us. I never heard back from the police about it. I've gone back there a few times since it happened, but I won't park and sit around again. I just drive friends through the bridge who haven't seen it before and then turn around and leave. All in all, it made for a pretty fitting campfire story, but I still wonder what he would have done if I'd stepped out of the car or he'd gotten hold of the nightstick flashlight. The only logical explanation is that he's a resident sick of kids playing down there, which I get, but to say he overreacted is an understatement. Not to mention, he completely fed into the lore of the crazy man against trespassers. I can only think of a handful of times I've ever seen someone so overcome with fury, especially over something so trivial. It was so unreal that when he first started yelling, I wondered if he was maybe just a normal level of upset but also socially maladjusted or maybe mentally challenged. Until he tried to grab my keys, that is, flying off the handle. There's no moral to this story, maybe carry some sort of protection in the future, but in any case, Bunny Man or whoever you are, let's not meet again. We were a group of 4, my girlfriend, 2 friends, and me. We had a fun evening at home, drinking and playing video games because we all had the next day off. We didn't really care about the time, and at 1 a.m. my friend mentioned they were taking the train home. My girlfriend and I decided to accompany them to the train station, but we found out they had missed the last train. So, we decided to walk them home, which was roughly a 6-kilometer journey through a forest. We were having a good time, listening to music and singing along, when suddenly, I heard something that sounded like a scream. "Did you hear that?" I asked. My girlfriend said it was probably a deer, so we carried on. 2 minutes later, we heard the scream again, followed by the word "help" from a woman. It was so loud and frightening that we immediately sobered up. The woman kept screaming for help non-stop, but we couldn't see anything in the pitch-dark forest. We tried to locate the screams, but it was difficult due to the echo. I shouted, "Hello, we're coming. Don't worry." We thought perhaps a woman had tripped or gotten lost. We called the police in the meantime, and they arrived pretty quickly, but the screams had stopped by then. We tried to explain our story to the police, and then she screamed again. 2 officers ran into the dark and found her, but we never got the chance to know what happened. We later heard from other sources that the woman had been taken by 3 men, and you can probably imagine what they did to her. The police told us to leave, took the woman with them, thanked us, and called us a taxi. That experience freaked us out for a long time. About 10 years ago, my family and I were driving from Ohio to Wyoming for the holidays to visit relatives. Due to storms further north, we traveled straight west instead of northwest at first, splitting the trip by staying the night in Omaha before heading up through Nebraska into South Dakota. Once we were far enough north, we turned west onto I-90. It had been over an hour since we saw any place with a public restroom, and we were on state routes with no rest areas. Anyone who has traveled with young kids knows that's pushing the limit for their bladders and boredom. Our daughter was begging us to stop somewhere to pee. South Dakota was even more deserted as we headed west. Finally, we reached a desperately needed rest stop as both my then 5-year-old daughter and I needed to pee. Just as we pulled in, a truck that had been following us for a while also pulled in. I didn't think too much of it at first until I started to open my door. My head turned to the right where the truck was parked a couple of spots over. My eyes met the driver's, and I just shivered. He was a skinny guy with a straggly gray-brown beard and dark eyes, wearing a dingy, dirty blue plaid shirt. He got out of his 90s brown and cream truck and started rummaging in the bed. I told my husband I didn't want to go into the rest stop alone because of the guy and the weird feeling I got from him. My husband thought I was being a little silly but agreed to come in with us. The next stop was Wall, South Dakota, at least 100 miles away according to the huge billboards we had passed advertising it. He figured he better empty his bladder even though he didn't particularly feel the need to. I grabbed our daughter, and we headed inside, followed by the guy who had finished rummaging in his truck but wasn't carrying anything when I glanced back. My daughter and I did our business in the women's restroom and headed back out to the lobby. As I expected, my husband was already out there since he didn't have a small human to chaperone. The older guy was also in the tiny lobby area, just standing there and glaring at my husband. My husband rushed us back to our car, and as we were buckling in, he locked the doors. Then he told me that the guy hadn't even gone into the restroom and was just standing in the lobby the whole time. He agreed with me that we might have had a close call and was glad it hadn't just been me and our daughter there. However, that's not the end of the story. Remember how I mentioned Wall and that it was 100 miles away? Well, that was 100 miles of pretty landscapes but also a decent number of turnoffs from the interstate. We didn't see the truck following us and thought the whole episode was completely behind us. But when we stopped in Wall to grab lunch and some road trip snacks, and to look around this homely but fun little tourist trap in the middle of nowhere, we saw the guy in the store, not 20 feet from us. Same face, beard, and dirty plaid shirt. Thankfully, we had already eaten. Since he was staring at us again, we quickly paid for our snacks and trinkets and got the hell out of there. We didn't see him again, but I was seriously creeped out until we reached our relatives in Wyoming safely with no further sightings of that accursed truck. Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed tonight's spine-chilling camping tales. Your support means the world, and I can't wait to bring you more heart-pounding horror stories soon. Stay safe, stay curious, and until next time, keep the campfire burning. Like and share this video and don't forget to subscribe the channel.